Dakota Territory, 1887. The wind carried dust across the prairie, swirling around the small cabin that stood alone against the vast emptiness of the frontier. Inside, Olivia Turner, 21 years old with golden blonde hair cascading in loose waves down her back, stood by the window. Her blue calico dress, hastily sewn for the occasion just days before, caught the morning light as she watched the horizon with anxious eyes. The cabin belonged to Reese Keller, a young rancher of 25 who had claimed this patch of land 3 years prior. Most men who ventured this far west carried the weathered lines of hardship on their faces, but Reese's features remained youthful despite his reputation as one of the territory's most capable cattlemen. His sandy brown hair and clear blue eyes gave him a boyish charm that belied the strength in his broad shoulders and the skill with which he handled both horse and gun. Reese believed that a man survived on the frontier by depending on no one. His parents had perished on the Oregon Trail when he was 14, leaving him to make his own way in a world that showed little mercy to those who couldn't stand alone. He'd built his modest ranch from nothing, working cattle drives and saving every penny until he could stake his claim. The ranch was small but growing, just like his ambitions. What wasn't growing was his desire for companionship. Reese had convinced himself that the frontier was no place for tender feelings. Love was a luxury men like him couldn't afford. A man needs nothing but his horse, his gun, and his wits out here, he often told himself as he rode the boundaries of his property, checking for breaks in the fence line or signs of rustlers. Anything else is just a weakness waiting to be exploited. Yet in the quiet evenings, when the prairie stretched silent and endless around his cabin, something hollow echoed in his chest. He ignored it, focusing instead on plans to expand his herd come spring. The stagecoach attack changed everything. Reese had been riding back from the nearest town, Cottonwood Springs, when he heard gunfire echoing across the plains. He spurred his horse toward the sound, cresting a hill to find 3 outlaws robbing the passengers of the westbound stage. Bodies lay scattered, the driver, the shotgun rider, and a male passenger already dead. And there she was, Olivia Turner, a young woman in a dusty traveling dress, standing defiantly before a rough-looking outlaw despite the terror evident in her wide eyes. Her trunk lay open, its contents scattered across the dirt road. "I said hand over them jewels, miss, or you'll join the others," the outlaw growled, waving his pistol. Without hesitation, Reese drew his Winchester rifle and fired a warning shot. "Step away from the lady," he called out, his voice carrying across the distance between them. What followed was brief but violent. When the dust settled, 2 outlaws lay dead, one had fled, and Reese found himself escorting a shaken Olivia Turner to his ranch, the only safe haven for miles. "I was traveling to Silver Creek," she explained as they rode double on his bay gelding. "My uncle arranged a position for me as the new schoolteacher." "Silver Creek's another 2 days' ride," Reese replied, uncomfortable with the warm weight of her pressed against his back. "You can rest at my place tonight. I'll take you there tomorrow." But as they approached his cabin, Olivia's composure finally cracked. "They're all dead," she whispered, her voice breaking. "And the outlaw who escaped, he saw my face. He heard where I was headed." Reese's jaw tightened. He knew how outlaws operated in these territories. They didn't leave witnesses, and they certainly didn't forgive those who'd cost them partners. "You can stay until it's safe," he found himself offering, surprising himself with his own words. "I have a spare room." Days turned into a week as reports reached them of the surviving outlaw, Jeremiah Pike, gathering a new gang and vowing revenge. Reese sent word to the marshal in Cottonwood Springs, but knew help would be slow in coming. In the meantime, Olivia proved herself surprisingly capable, taking over the cooking and mending clothes that had gone too long without a woman's attention. "You don't talk much about your past," she ventured one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun sink below the horizon in a blaze of orange and purple. "Not much to tell," Reese replied, his eyes scanning the darkening prairie out of habit. "Parents died when I was young. Made my way west. Built this place. All alone. A man's better off that way out here." Olivia studied him with those clear green eyes that seemed to see right through him. "Is that what you truly believe, Mr. Keller? That we're better off facing this world alone?" The question settled uncomfortably in his chest. Before he could respond, the sound of approaching hooves put them both on alert. But it was only Jackson Miller, Reese's nearest neighbor from 5 miles away. Evening, Reese, Jackson called, tipping his hat to Olivia. Marshall sent word. Pike's gang hit the Dawson place yesterday. They're working their way this direction. Fear flashed across Olivia's face, and something protective stirred in Reese's chest. Thanks for the warning, Jack, he said, his hand unconsciously moving closer to his holstered revolver. After Jackson departed, Olivia turned to Reese, her face pale in the fading light. I should leave. I'm putting you in danger by staying. And where would you go? Reese asked, more sharply than he intended. Pike's between us and town, and you'd never make it to Silver Creek alone. I won't have your death on my conscience. Won't have yours on mine either, he replied firmly. We'll figure something out. That night, as Reese sat cleaning his Winchester by lamplight, a plan began to form. It was risky, perhaps even foolish, but it might be the only way to ensure Olivia's safety. The next morning, he presented his idea over breakfast. There's a way to protect you that Pike might not expect, he began awkwardly. If people thought we were married, Pike wouldn't be looking for a schoolteacher anymore. He'd be looking for a rancher's wife. Olivia's spoon clattered against her bowl. Married? Not really, Reese hastened to add, feeling heat rise to his face. Just on paper. For protection. We could have Reverend Wells draw up the certificate, but keep it quiet that it's just for show. You do that? For a stranger? Reese couldn't meet her eyes. It's the decent thing to do. What he didn't say was how the idea had settled into his mind with surprising rightness. How in just a week, Olivia had somehow transformed his solitary cabin into something that, for the first time since his parents died, felt like a home. 2 days later, they stood before Reverend Wells in his small church in Cottonwood Springs. Reese had insisted they travel at night and by a roundabout route to avoid Pike's men. Olivia wore her blue dress, now carefully laundered and pressed, with wildflowers hastily gathered on the journey tucked into her upswept hair. The ceremony was brief, with only the Reverend's wife and the local doctor serving as witnesses. Reese fumbled through his vows, and used to speaking so many words at once. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, an unexpected tightness gripped his chest. Remember, this is just until Pike is captured, Reese reminded her as they rode back to the ranch, this time with Olivia on a mare purchased in town. Then you can go on to Silver Creek like you planned. Of course, she agreed, though something in her voice sounded different. It's very kind of you to go to such lengths for my safety. That night, after ensuring Olivia was settled in her room, still separate from his, despite what their marriage certificate claimed, Reese sat on the porch with his rifle across his lap. The vast night sky stretched overhead, stars scattered like diamond dust across black velvet. For the first time in years, his solitude felt like a burden rather than a comfort. The thought of Olivia eventually leaving for Silver Creek created an ache he hadn't anticipated. The next morning, he found her preparing breakfast, humming softly as she worked. She turned at his entrance, a shy smile touching her lips. It's my first day as your wife, she whispered, and something in those simple words pierced straight through the armor he'd built around his heart. Reese crossed the room in 3 strides, taking her hands in his. I promise to protect you always, he vowed, the words emerging with an intensity that surprised them both. No matter what comes. For 2 weeks, they settled into an uneasy routine. During the day, they worked side by side, Reese tending the cattle and mending fences while Olivia managed the household and started a small vegetable garden beside the cabin. At night, Reese took turns with his ranch hand, Miguel Santos, keeping watch for Pike's gang. Word reached them that Pike had raided 2 more homesteads, leaving destruction in his wake. Each report tightened the knot of fear and responsibility in Reese's chest. They're coming for us, he told Olivia one evening. It's just a matter of when. Instead of the fear he expected, determination hardened her delicate features. Then we'll be ready, she replied, picking up the shotgun he'd taught her to use. I won't be helpless this time. The attack came at dawn 3 days later. Reese was already awake, checking the horses in the barn, when the first shots rang out. He grabbed his rifle and ran toward the cabin, his heart hammering against his ribs at the thought of Olivia alone inside. Pike had brought 5 men. They surrounded the property, sending bullets splintering into the wooden walls of both barn and cabin. From the cabin window, Reese saw the flash of Olivia's shotgun as she returned fire. Pride and terror warred within him as he worked his way from the barn to the cabin, using the cover of the water trough and woodpile. Miguel was pinned down behind the corral, exchanging shots with two of Pike's men. "Keller," Pike's voice carried across the yard. "Send out the woman, and maybe I'll let you live." "Go to hell, Pike," Reese shouted back, squeezing off another round that sent one of the outlaws diving for cover. The firefight stretched on, minutes feeling like hours. Reese managed to wound one of Pike's men, and Miguel took down another. But they were still outnumbered, and Reese could see Pike working his way closer to the cabin's rear entrance. In that moment, Reese realized with startling clarity that his old belief had been wrong. The frontier wasn't about surviving alone. It was about having something worth fighting for, someone worth dying for. With reckless determination, he broke from cover, firing rapidly to draw attention away from the cabin's back door. A bullet grazed his arm, tearing through his shirt sleeve and leaving a streak of fire across his skin. He barely felt it, focused only on reaching Olivia before Pike did. He burst through the cabin door just as Pike was forcing his way through the back. Olivia stood there, shotgun raised, her hands steady despite the fear in her eyes. What happened next unfolded in heartbeats. Pike fired. Reese lunged forward, shoving Olivia aside. Pain exploded in his shoulder as he returned fire, his bullet finding Pike's chest just as the outlaw squeezed off another shot. Then silence, broken only by the diminishing gunfire outside as the remaining outlaws, seeing their leader fall, retreated. "Reese." Olivia's voice seemed to come from far away as darkness edged his vision. He felt her hands pressing against his shoulder, trying to stem the bleeding. "Stay with me. Please stay with me." "Told you I'd protect you," he managed, a weak smile touching his lips before consciousness slipped away. Reese drifted in and out of awareness for days. Fever claimed him as infection set in, despite Olivia and Miguel's best efforts to clean and bandage his wounds. In his lucid moments, he found Olivia always at his side, her face drawn with exhaustion, her hands cool against his burning skin as she bathed his forehead. In his delirium, secrets spilled from him, his loneliness, his fears, his growing feelings for her. Later, he wouldn't remember what he'd confessed, only the soothing sound of her voice promising to stay. When the fever finally broke, Reese awoke to find Olivia asleep in a chair beside his bed, her hands still holding his. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the golden strands in her hair. Something tight in his chest finally unraveled completely. "You're still here," he whispered. Her eyes fluttered open, relief washing over her tired features. "Where else would I be?" "Silver Creek," he replied, "teaching children their letters instead of nursing a stubborn rancher." "I sent word to Silver Creek," she admitted. "I told them I wouldn't be coming after all." Hope, fragile and unexpected, blossomed in Reese's chest. "Why?" "Because somewhere between that stagecoach attack and watching you risk your life for mine, I realized something." Her fingers tightened around his. "I found what I was really looking for without ever reaching Silver Creek." Recovery came slowly. Pike's remaining men had been captured by a marshal's posse 2 days after the attack, ending the threat that had brought them together. As Reese's strength returned, the question of what would happen next hung between them. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Reese finally found the courage to speak the truth. "The marriage was supposed to be just for protection," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "But somewhere along the way, it became real for me." He turned to face her fully. "I don't want you to stay out of gratitude or duty, Olivia. If you still want to go to Silver Creek, I won't stop you." Olivia's eyes shimmered in the fading light. "When I first came west, I was running from an empty life back east. My parents died last year, and nothing was keeping me there. I thought teaching in Silver Creek would give me purpose." She moved closer, her hand finding his. "But I found something better here. Not just purpose, but belonging." "Are you saying you want this marriage to be real?" Reese hardly dared to believe what he was hearing. "It already is real," she answered simply. "It has been since the moment you promised to protect me always." The kiss they shared as the last rays of sunlight painted the prairie gold sealed a promise neither had expected to make when fate first brought them together. In the months that followed, the Keller ranch transformed. The vegetable garden expanded, curtains appeared in windows, and the spare room became a nursery in anticipation of the child they learned was coming in the spring. Reese hired 2 more ranch hands and purchased adjacent land from a family heading back east. Olivia started a small school for the children of neighboring ranchers, teaching lessons 3 days a week in a corner of their expanded cabin. Her laughter-filled spaces Reese hadn't even realized were empty. On clear nights, they would sit together on the porch, watching the stars wheel overhead. Sometimes they spoke of their plans. More cattle, maybe horses too. Another room on the cabin when more children came. Other times they sat in comfortable silence, Reese's arm around Olivia's shoulders, her head resting against him. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" she asked one such evening, her hand resting on her growing belly. "If you hadn't happened upon that stagecoach?" Reese considered this, watching a shooting star trace a brief, brilliant path across the darkened sky. "I used to think a man needed nothing but himself out here," he replied. "That anything else was just a weakness." And now, he turned to look at her, this woman who had shown him how wrong he'd been. How strength could be found in connection rather than isolation. How love, far from being a luxury, was the very foundation that made survival meaningful. "Now I know better," he said simply, drawing her closer. "Now I know that having someone to protect gives a man something worth fighting for. And that's not weakness, it's the greatest strength there is." As winter gave way to spring, Olivia gave birth to a daughter they named Hope, who arrived with her mother's golden hair and her father's blue eyes. Reese, who once believed the frontier too harsh for tender feelings, found himself utterly transformed by the tiny fingers that curled trustingly around his own. The ranch prospered under their joint care. What had once been a solitary outpost became a gathering place, with neighboring families coming together for barn raisings, harvest celebrations, and Olivia's school lessons. The cabin expanded room by room, a physical manifestation of the life they were building together. 5 years after that fateful stagecoach attack, Reese stood on his porch watching his pregnant wife teaching their daughter to plant sunflower seeds along the garden fence. Their son, Robert, not quite 3, toddled after them with a small watering can clutched in his chubby hands. The ranch had tripled in size, with a proper barn and bunkhouse for the hands who helped work the growing herd. What had once been a bare patch of prairie was now a true home, with shade trees starting to mature and a white picket fence enclosing the yard. "Papa, come see," Hope called, waving excitedly at the first sprout from last year's planting pushing through the soil. As Reese joined his family, kneeling in the dirt to admire his daughter's discovery, he realized that the promise he'd made on Olivia's first day as his wife had been kept in ways he could never have imagined. He had protected her from danger, yes, but more than that, they had protected each other from the true threat of frontier life, the isolating loneliness that could wither a soul more surely than any bullet. Together, they had built not just a ranch, but a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone, as enduring as the vast prairie that had brought them together.